Hi everyone, how you doing? Oh, it's warm today, isn't it? It's been a real stinky hot one today, so I know Nana was really struggling to sleep last night. I hope you got a good night's sleep. So, yeah, it's bedtime. So I'm going to read you tonight a book called How the Whale Became. So, if you're sitting comfortably and as cool as you possibly can be, I will start. Now, God had a little back garden. In this garden, he grew carrots, onions, beans, and whatever else he needed for his dinner. It was a fine little garden. The plants were all in neat rows, and a tidy fence kept out the animals. God was pleased with it. One day he was weeding the carrots and he saw a strange thing between the rows. It was no more than an inch long, and it was black. It was like a black, shiny bean. At one end, it had a little root growing out into the ground. "That's very odd," said God. "I've never seen one of these before. I wonder what it will grow into." So he left it growing. Next day, as he was gardening, he remembered the little shiny black thing, and he went to see how it was getting on. He was surprised. During the night it had doubled in length. It was now 2 inches long, like a shiny black egg. Every day God went to have a look at it, and every day it was bigger. Every morning, in fact, it was just twice as long as it had been the morning before. When it was 6 feet long, God said, "It's getting too big. I must pull it up and cook it." But he left it a day. Next day, it was 12 foot long and far too big to go into any of God's pans. God stood scratching his head and looking at it. Already it had crushed most of his carrots out of sight. If it went on growing at this rate, it would soon be pushing his house over. Suddenly, as he looked at it, it opened an eye and looked at him. God was amazed. The eye was quite small and round. It was near the thickest end and farthest from the root. He walked round to the other side, and there was another eye, also looking at him. "Well," said God, "and how do you do?" The round eye blinked, and the smooth, glossy skin under it wrinkled slightly as if the thing was smiling, but there was no mouth, so God wasn't sure. Next morning God rose early and went out into the garden. Sure enough, during the night his new black plant with eyes had doubled its length again. It had pushed down part of his fence, so that its head was sticking out into the road, one eye looking up and one down. Its side was pressed against the kitchen wall. God walked round to its front and looked it in the eye. "You are too big," he said sternly. "Please stop growing before you push my house down." To his surprise, the plant opened a mouth, a long slit of a mouth which ran back on either side under the eyes. "I can't," said the mouth. God didn't know what to say. At last he said, "Well then, can you tell me what sort of thing you are? Do you know?" "I," said the thing, "am whalewort." "You have heard of eggplant and buckwheat and dog daisy. Well, I'm whalewort." There was nothing God could do about that. By next morning the whalewort stretched right across the road, and his side had pushed the kitchen wall into the kitchen. He was now longer and fatter than a bus. Wow! When God saw this, he called the creatures together. "Here's a strange thing," he said. "Look at it. What are we going to do with it?" The creatures walked around the whalewort, looking at him. His skin was so shiny they could see their faces in it. "Leave it," suggested Ostrich, and wait till it dies down. "But it might go on growing," said God, "until it covers the whole earth. We shall have to live on its back. Think of that." "I suggest," said the Mouse, "that we throw it into the sea." God thought. "No," he said at last, "that's too severe. Let's just leave it for a few days." After 3 more days, God's house was completely flat. The whalewort was as long as a street. "Now," said the Mouse, "it's too late to throw it into the sea. Whalewort is too big to move." But God fastened long thick ropes around him and called up all the creatures to help haul the ends. Hey, cried the Wellwort, leave me alone. You're going into the sea, cried a mouse. And it serves you right, taking up all this space. But I'm happy, cried Wellwort again. I'm happy just lying here. Leave me and let me sleep. I was made to just lie and sleep. Into the sea, cried Mouse. No, cried Wellwort. Into the sea, cried all the creatures, and they hauled on the ropes. With a great groan, Wellwort's root came out of the ground. He began to thresh and twist, beating down houses and trees with his long root, as the creatures dragged him willy-nilly through the countryside. At last they got him to the top of a high cliff. With a great shout they rolled him over the edge and into the sea. Help, help, cried the Wellwort. I shall drown. Please let me come back on land where I can sleep. Not until you're smaller, shouted God, and then you can come back. But how am I to get smaller, wept the Wellwort as he rolled to and fro in the sea. Please show me how to get smaller so I can live on the land. God bent down from the high cliff and poked Wellwort on the top of his head with his finger. Ow! Cried Wellwort. What was that for? You've made a hole. The water will come in. No, it won't, said God, but some of you will come out. Not now. Just you start blowing some of yourself out through that hole. Wellwort blew, and a high jet of spray shot up out of the hole that God had made. Now go on blowing, said God. Wellwort blew and blew. Soon he was quite a bit smaller. As he shrank, his skin, that had been so tight and glossy, became covered with tiny wrinkles. At last God said to him, When you're as small as a cucumber, just give me a shout. Then you can come back into my garden. But until then, you shall stay in the sea. And God walked away with all his creatures, leaving Wellwort rolling and blowing into the sea. Soon Wellwort was down to the size of a bus, but blowing was hard work, and by the time he felt like asleep. And by this time he felt like asleep. He took a deep breath and sank down to the bottom of the sea for a sleep. Above all, he loved to sleep. When he woke, he gave a roar of dismay. While he was asleep, he had grown back to the length of the streets and the fatness of a ship with 2 funnels. He rose to the surface as fast as he could and began to blow. Soon he was back down to the size of a lorry, but soon, too, he felt like another sleep. He took a deep breath and sank to the bottom. When he woke, he was back to the length of a street. This went on for years, and it's still going on. As fast as Wellwort shrinks with blowing, he grows with sleeping. Sometimes, when he's feeling very strong, he gets himself down to the size of a motor car. But always, before he gets himself down to the size of a cucumber, he remembers how nice it is to sleep. And when he wakes, he's grown again. He longs to come back on land and sleep in the sun with his root in the earth, but instead of that he must roll and blow out on the wild sea, and until he's allowed to come back on land, the creatures call him just Whale. Oh, so did you know that's where whales came from? It grew from a little tiny little pebble into a massive big whale in God's garden. Wow. So, shall we see if there's a picture? There we go. Can you see that? Wow. So that was good, wasn't it? Well, I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope you sleep. I just hope you sleep tonight. I don't know about sleeping well, but I hope you sleep. Love you loads. And I'll see you again tomorrow for the next story. So be really, 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 really good. And I love you loads and loads. So, Atty, sleep well, I love you. Ruby, sleep well, I love you. Max, sleep well, I love you. Torby Tumble, sleep well. Nana loves you. Bye everyone. Love you.